Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Real 1% podcast. I'm your host, Michael Daly, and we're starting off a new series in regards to the podcast. It's going to be dealing with a lot of military veterans and even military members that are found success through the real estate realm of business, whether they're a sales associate, a realtor, or just an investor. And today is my first episode back. Happy 2025 to everybody. And we have Tracy. Appreciate you coming on, Tracy. How's your day going so far?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And you said you were a Navy veteran. So, how was that chapter in your life? I know it's been closed maybe for a little while now, but looking back on your time in the Navy, did it go by fast for you? Give us a little short synopsis on your time in service.
Sure. Yes, I was in the Navy. I joined the Navy in 2000, so pre September 11th, and I was a hospital corpsman. So I did that for about 7 years, and then got my commission as a healthcare administrator. Switched over to the dark side, became an officer. I figured if I was going to stick around long enough, I might as well get paid for it. so
True.
did that. The Navy was kind enough then to send me to grad school. So I got my MBA and my master's in healthcare admin, all courtesy of the Navy. And then finished out my career as a healthcare administrator. Towards the end of my career, around year 17, I met my husband. And then we got stationed in Singapore, had two beautiful girls while we were living there. And my life changed dramatically. And so I had always had, like, the Navy was my life. I loved my job, I loved my career, but it was everything. And so once I started having a family, I felt like pulled in two different directions. And I didn't like how that felt because I felt like I was sucking at being a mom and wife. And I was also not showing up 100% the way I was used to in my job. So that was kind of a turning point for me in figuring out, like, am I going to stay in the military? Am I going to get out? I always said I would stay in the Navy as long as I was having fun and as long as I felt like I was getting at least as much out of the military as they were getting out of me. And up until that point, it was never a question. So I ended up deciding that I was ready to close that chapter and focus on my family for a little while. So at 22 years, I retired. And I had the great opportunity to do a skills bridge as I was retiring. And initially, I wasn't going to do one because I thought skills bridge was just like this corporate, transition into the corporate world. And I had no desire to work in the corporate world. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I met a local realtor who had a skills bridge program. And his whole mission was to give back to veterans and teach all the different ways that you can build wealth through real estate. And so once I knew that that was an option, I was like, oh, well, that sounds like a skills bridge that I might be interested in. And so I signed up for that skills bridge, and it's been off to the races ever since then. I think I finally found my niche with real estate investing and kind of what works for me and my family. And so I retired, and that was a little over 2 years ago now. And yeah, no regrets. If there's a regret, it's that I didn't do it sooner, because you can retire at 20, and I stayed till 22 and a half.
True.
But that gave me that transition time that I needed to be ready.
Okay. I guess one thing that really stuck out to me first when you said you joined right before 9/11. It's funny that you say that because I just went to New York City and we went to the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and that was my first
Hmm.
time ever there. And I was in eighth grade at the time, and I can still remember it like clear as day. So, what was kind of going through your mind, like when you joined the Navy and then 9/11 happens, like, and you're in the medical field, all that going at once, like, what was going through your head, once that happened?
Yeah, great question. So when I joined the Navy, I had gone to college for 2 years. I knew I wanted to work in the medical field. I thought I wanted to be a surgeon. I had wanted to be a surgeon since I was like 8. I'm sure I watched some cool movie or something and was like, oh, that looks awesome. I want to do that. And like, that was it. Like, from that point forward, I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do so that I could go to medical school. I got good grades. I, did all the different activities, tried to have a well-rounded application for school. Um, but then as I went through the process, I uh, I realized that I really just wanted to help people. And it took all the way, I took the MCATs, I was applying to medical school and realized I don't think I actually have to be a doctor to help people. There are other ways to help people.
Yeah.
But that process kind of happened simultaneously while I joined the military. So when I joined the military, it was specifically for the education. it was expensive going to college. And I was like, oh, I need to find another way to do this because I'm going to be so deep in debt by the time I become a doctor that it's not going to be worth it anymore because I'm just going to be paying off all these loans. And so I joined the Navy initially to, for them to pay for my education. I fought really hard to be a corpsman because they kept trying to tell me they didn't have any female corpsman billets. And I was like, all right, well, call me when you do. And miraculously, 2 weeks later, they found some. But it was really interesting. I did all of my training that first year, and then I was at Naval Medical Center, Bethesda in Washington, D.C. when September 11th happened. And just like you said, I can remember exactly where I was. I was on orientation in the OR. I had only been there for like 2 months. And, I'm scrubbed in on this case and we're listening to the radio and they come on and they start talking about what was going on. And I mean, there were many other people in that room who had a lot more experience in the military than I did at that point. And, the tone changed very quickly and people were like, oh shit, we're going to war. Whatever this is, it's not good. And things are about to get real. And so like we shut down the OR for the day. Everybody was just sitting in the lounge watching, over and over again on a loop on the TV. Is like the worst thing ever. But yeah, things changed that day. For me, not as significantly as you might think, like because I was at the hospital and I was at Bethesda, we were like a receiving location for a lot of wounded warriors. So during that period of time, I did actually deploy on the Comfort, spent about 6 months in the Gulf, but thankfully we did not see a lot of American casualties. They all got put on a bird and sent to Germany and back to the States. They didn't really come out to the hospital ship. So we were there, but for all the right reasons, we didn't really have to do much. And then actually my final job at Bethesda as a corpsman before I got my commission, I got to work in the medevac office. And so, I got to be a part of supporting the wounded Marines and sailors that were coming back, which was a really, really unique opportunity that, nobody wants to have that. But I was grateful to have the opportunity to have a role in making sure that they were taken care of and that we were ready to receive them and give them the best care when they got back to the States.
Sounds like you definitely had a, crazy turn of events when that happened and, everything worked out and you're able to provide the service you wanted to, take care of people and help others out. So that's great to hear that. When you talked about, you found the Skill Bridge program once your time was getting close to an end in the Navy, did you ever plan on what you wanted to do getting out, or were you just stuck kind of in that that realm of serving service, whatever that may be at whatever duty station you're at? Did you ever plan for what will your next chapter look like after the military?
Yeah, great question. So I think my plan, for most of my career, I was single. So I was really only thinking about me. And so my plan was really like work until I didn't need to work anymore. So it was like, get to retirement so that I could retire and then structure my life in a way that I can live off whatever my retirement was so that I didn't have to work. There was an option B, which was, get like a high power healthcare executive job and make, multiple six figures, but like, work myself to death. That was not really the most desirable, but was always kind of like the backup plan. But once I had a family, like that really shifted and it only reinforced the option A, which was like, how can I retire and retire? Because I want to be present for my family. Like I mentioned, I did not like feeling like I was being pulled in two different directions. And so it was all about, how can we set ourselves up for success so that I can retire and actually be home with the kids and kind of be that stable, foundation for the family to, the home base. And so we were very fortunate. I did buy one house during my time on active duty, and it was in San Antonio. So our initial plan was to move back to San Antonio, live in that house, and retire. We moved back from overseas during 2020. So another, life-altering global impact event with COVID. So when I reached out to my tenants to let them know I was not intending to renew their lease, they begged to please not make them move. They offered to pay us more money. And it was enough that it was like, okay, well, we'll see what our other options are. And, thankfully this was 2020. So interest rates had not shot up yet. Housing was still pretty cheap. And we were able to get into a brand new construction property in San Antonio. So I maintained that lease for them. And then the following year, as things had kind of settled out, they finished their education program and they were ready to leave. So they moved out. And because we didn't move into that house, it was what I had always bought as my retirement house. I was like, well, I don't need this anymore, so I'm gonna go ahead and sell it. And timing wise, that worked out really well for me because it allowed us to build a cushion. So we were able to take the profits from that property and just put them in the bank. And so, I was it the most efficient use of those funds? Could I have 1031 them into, that profit into another investment property? Potentially. But at that time for our family, having that buffer was the best thing because it really allowed me to retire and just retire without feeling that pressure of like, okay, now what am I going to do for money? It gave us the bandwidth to be able to take a step back. And so that was really what I wanted going into retirement. I didn't want a job. I wanted to just be able to retire and relax for a little while. And so that's what I did.
That's fair enough. I mean, anyone that knows the military knows it's hard to be able to stay structured as a tight knit family unit with a lot of time. I mean, you could be tight knit, but when you're dropping your kids off at 6 o'clock in the morning to get to PT by 6:30, go to work all day till 1700 at night or longer. I mean, you're really cut short for time. So props to you. I'm a dad of an 8-year-old child, and I know that I didn't have a kid in the military, but my friends did, and I've seen them do that. I saw them drop their kids off
Yeah.
before the sun came up and get them when the sun was going down. So it's definitely tough in the military, and making your family a priority, whether you're in or out, is definitely valuable because that time goes by so fast. Especially when you always hear your parents say it before you have kids, and then you have your kids of your own. They're like, man, this kid's almost 9 years old. Like, where the
Yeah,
time
it all
go?
makes sense now how fast
Yeah,
the time goes, right?
seriously,
Yeah.
you start balding, get a couple of gray hairs. You're like, what happened, man? I was so. Did you use your VA loan when you were buying those homes?
I did for the second house. So the first house that I bought in 2007, at that time, there was a loan product that was available that gave me a better option at the time than the VA loan offered. And so I had used that instead. But for the house that we bought when we moved back in 2020, we used the VA loan. Um, and then because it was Texas and it was pretty cheap to buy a house there at that time, I was able to then use my VA loan again when we moved a second time. So the VA loan has been a great help in kind of getting things off the ground with real estate investing.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you find out a lot of this information about the VA loan yourself, or did you have someone mentor you, or were you learning it when you were doing the skill bridge? How did you come about all the information on, some people don't think you can use it, twice, but as long as you have enough funding left in the VA loan, you don't have any bad derogatory remarks, or short sales or anything like that, you can continue to use it, right?
Yeah, great question. So I think there were a few different places where I was kind of doing my research. Um, Primarily a couple of groups on Facebook. Bigger Pockets. I was consuming a lot of information from Bigger Pockets because this is when I was making my initial, I had done the skills bridge and it was like, oh, okay, I want to invest. I see the value in getting a multi-unit property where we can rent out some of the other units and live in one. I really wanted to start expanding our personal portfolio. And I mean, to be fair, when I sold that other house, I had wanted to roll it into an investment property and buy like a triplex. But because the cost had gone up so much, I made a good profit on that property, but it wasn't enough to be a down payment for a triplex or a quadplex because those had gone up too. And
Yeah.
so timing wise, it just made a lot more sense for us to put those funds in a savings account and kind of give us that space to reposition our life. But Bigger Pockets, I would say for sure. Active duty passive income. I got a lot of my foundational education through their Facebook group as well. Um, but those are probably the two places where I really kind of got started.
Okay. What was going through your mind when you started doing the skill bridge program? Did you like what you were, seeing, and how'd all that pan out for you?
Yeah, that was the one of the most incredible experiences that just sort of fell into my lap. I was not looking for it. I happened to go pick up the keys from the property manager who was managing that other property for me. And the owner of the company was the guy who does the skills bridge, and we just kind of started shooting the shit, and he found out I was retiring, and he's like, oh, you should come to my skills bridge. And I'm like looking around like, you have a skills bridge? I was like, this is amazing. And I mean, he's so passionate about sharing all the different ways that you can build wealth through real estate. And I think for me, I was always kind of frustrated because throughout my whole career, I watched a lot of my colleagues build wealth through real estate. You know, they would buy a house, they would live in it for a couple years, they would PCS, they would rent it out, and they would just kind of repeat that cycle at every duty station. But I felt like I was always in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was in high cost of living places like DC and San Diego. I lived overseas. I did Naples and Singapore. So there are very few places in my career where I felt like I could legitimately afford a house, especially as a single junior enlisted or, you know, junior officer. So that house that I bought when I was in San Antonio for grad school is the only house that I bought while I was on active duty. But when I did the skills bridge, it was like my eyes were opened, and that was not the only way to make money in real estate. And so he broke it down, and we talked about short-term rentals, midterm rentals, property management, syndication, you know, all these different things. And when we talked about syndication, that was the thing that really connected for me, and like the light bulb went on, and I was like, man, I was like, I think that there really could be a way for me to leverage my background and experience in healthcare leadership. I have my MBA, so I have a strong like business foundation. And I'll tell you, I was actually kind of pissed when I first learned about it, because I'm like, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that there's a way that I could have been dumping my money into somebody else's real estate project and building wealth and not have to do any of the work? Like, that would have worked really well for someone like me who wasn't necessarily on the track, living in the locations where it makes sense to buy and then rent out your property and just kind of rinse and repeat that cycle. There are some duty stations that work really well for that. But the places that I was made that a little bit challenging. And so that sort of like, it really clicked for me. And it was like, okay, now that I know that this is a thing, I want to make it my mission to make sure that everybody else knows that this is a thing too. And it may not be the right fit for everyone, but everyone should at least know that it's an option. And so that's kind of where I really got, you know, started to dig my feet in and was like, okay, how do I learn, you know, not just that this exists, but like, how do I learn how to do it and get connected with the right people so that as I am telling my network of people who I know that, you know, hey, did you know that this is an option for you? That I have deals that I can bring for them that are going to be aligned with their financial goals. And so that's, I mean, that skills bridge really changed the game for me because it opened my eyes to other ways to build wealth through real estate.
How long was the program? Was it like 3 months?
It's like 12 weeks. Yep. It's a
12 weeks.
3 month. It actually was under the Hiring Our Heroes umbrella,
Okay.
which was also great. I think they do a really good job if you are looking for another job after the military. Their program is pretty structured. Like every Friday, they have special guests that come on, and you do a Zoom call with all the other people in that program. You know, and they really help with kind of holding your hand through the transition, making sure that you have access to the right tools for, you know, resume writing and mentorship. And it was a really, really great program overall. I did not take advantage of all the things that they offered because I wasn't looking for a job. But I thought they did a really good job of kind of laying out what is available to you.
So when you heard about syndication and all the other ways you can invest in real estate, were you excited to like kind of break free from the military and get the ball rolling for yourself and
Oh
your
yeah,
family?
absolutely. I couldn't wait. So while I was still, you know, I was still technically in the military for like a few more months there, doing my finishing skills bridge, doing my terminal leave. So during that time, I started to do some research on like, how can I learn how to be a syndicator? You know, what, I don't even know what that really means. I just know
Yeah.
that this is a thing now, right? And so the individual who introduced me to it, he knew what it was because he had invested as a passive limited partner in deals, but he had never run a deal as a general partner. And so he couldn't really teach me how to do it. He just was able to teach me that it is there. So I started doing a bunch of research, and I stumbled across the active duty passive income MMA, the Military Mastermind Academy, specifically for investing in commercial real estate. And that was another like game changer for me because the other programs that I came across that you can learn how to do syndication cost like $30,000. And I was like, I don't even know what this is yet, really, right? Like, I am not prepared to put that kind of money into this. Like, how do I know this isn't a scam, you know?
Right.
And so ADPI has this MMA program at a much more palatable price point. I mean, you still got to put some skin in the game. You're going to have to put some money up to get that education, but the quality of the education that they put out for that significantly lower price point, I have not, that was 2 years ago, and I've yet to come across another program that even comes close in terms of the value for the money. And so I did the MMA program January of 23, so 2 years ago. And I mean, it really laid that foundation for what is syndication? What are all the different roles on the team? What are the steps that you need to go through to find, acquire, manage, and sell a large commercial property? And so that is what really kind of got me going. It helped me find my role, which now is capital raising and investor relations. It's interesting. When I started, I thought I wanted to do asset management because my background is more in like business operations, and so I just thought that that would be like the logical fit. But once we started doing personality tests and we started learning more about the roles, I realized that I'm actually really well suited for capital raising and investor relations because it's all about connecting people and relationship management, which I love. And so, when I look back, you kind of asked about my military career. When I look back on my experience in the military, I did so much of that. When I was, a junior enlisted and a surgical tech, I worked on the clinical side. So I got a lot of exposure to what clinical medicine is like. But then I switched over to be a healthcare administrator. And so a huge part of my role was always this, helping to have the meeting of the minds where you connect the clinicians with the bean counters and like, how can we all come together to successfully execute the mission, right? And then similarly, as I came up in the ranks, it was like, I came from the junior enlisted ranks. I started as I graduated boot camp as an E3 only because I had gone to college for 2 years. So I had some education credits that gave me that initial bump, right? But, I started in the junior enlisted ranks and I worked my way up to E6 and then I got my commission. And so I was sort of that connector between the junior enlisted and the senior officers and making sure that everybody understood, these are the pain points, and bringing that up to leadership, or hey, this is why leadership is telling us to do this even though maybe they're not saying it this way, and just kind of being that go between and translator or connector, if you will. And so I feel like coming into the investor relations space has been a really great fit because now I can leverage those same skills but just in a different way. Now I'm connecting operators who have deals and know how to run them with people who want to invest in real estate, but maybe don't want the headache of being a landlord, or maybe don't have time, but they have money and they'd like to get it into the real estate space. And so it's been a really, really awesome adventure kind of going over these last 2 years of kind of finding my way in this space. But now, now that I'm where I am, it's a little easier to kind of look back and be like, oh, it really makes sense that this is kind of how all the pieces fell into place. But I've really been enjoying it, and yeah, I can't believe it's already been 2 years.
So you talk like you're like killing the game, and I'm sure you are. But when you first started off, like we all have to go through this phase in life. Joining the military, most people succeed, they do well. They rise to the top of the ranks, and then they close that chapter. And if you're not like someone that's been in the military 30, 40 years, you might want to do something. You might need to make ends meet. You might need to make a wage for your family to live off. So like, was it ever hard for you mentally, emotionally, to start
Oh yeah.
over a new chapter in life? I mean, because you definitely, you said you can't believe it's been 2 years, but like, I mean, I know for me, for like getting started in real estate after doing the military, then government contracting, and always succeeding, and then real estate, like being a realtor, like you don't get paid a salary. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Hmm.
what was going through your mind when you had to restart this chapter? Obviously you got hit with excitement at first when you found out about syndication and all the other ways that you can make money in real estate, but when reality hits you, or something where it's sunk in after you got done doing your course, or like that honeymoon phase maybe wore off, what was it like for you during those times?
Oh yeah. Tough. there have definitely been a couple of, I would say like major slumps over the course of those 2 years where it's like you kind of get that initial energy and it's like, this is cool. And then it's like, oh man, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe who am I kidding? Like, who am I to be doing this? Like, I feel like there is a lot of imposter syndrome. Also a lot of like just discouragement. Like if you see something and you are confident that it's supposed to work, but then you do it and it doesn't work like immediately, it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
But realizing that like it takes time. And I think the biggest lesson that I've learned so far has been related to consistency. So early on, I found a few wins by taking action, but then it would be like I would do it once or twice and be like, oh yeah, that totally worked. And then I would do it like one more time and it wouldn't have worked as well. And I was like, oh, you know, but then it's like, okay, well, I gotta keep trying. You can't just stop, right?
True.
And I think that's where it can be really, really tough when you're learning something new. Is it's easy when you're seeing that immediate gratification or that immediate result, because it's almost like a dopamine hit, right? Like you do the action, you get the results, like yes, okay, and then you do it again. And so as long as you're getting that immediate response, it's like, okay, this is good. Well, the second you do something and you don't get that hit, it's like, oh. And so for me, I think the biggest thing has been learning to do it anyway, and to really establish, like, focus on building habits and consistency in my actions, because I have seen time and time again that when I do the things that have been proven to work, and that I have definitely paid for continuing coaching and mentorship once I got that foundational education from ADPI. And that is the same thing, regardless of which avenue, which coach you're talking about. Every single one of them hones in on that same key aspect of the consistency. And so as I have pushed myself beyond those points of frustration and kind of like feel the fear, but do it anyway, or not get that dopamine hit, but do it anyway, I've really started to see more and more traction in my business. And so that would be kind of like my biggest advice would be, if you're starting something new, set realistic expectations for yourself that it's probably not just going to be all, roses and rainbows, and everything's not going to be perfect, every step along the way. But if you focus on the habits and the actions that are going to set you up for success, and you just keep doing those things, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't feel like it's working, that over time it will. But it's, especially in this day and age, it is really, really hard for us to give something time. But that consistency really has paid off.
Well, I guess it gives everyone that sticks to it the upper hand, right? I mean, most people want,
Yeah.
like you said, they want instant gratification. If you don't, oh, I showed someone one house, didn't buy it, I'm done with real estate. Like that's just not
Yeah.
that's just not how it's going to go. It's not like, you know, not at all going to be like that. But that's something I know I've struggled with. But it's like you just got to stay the course. You got to find out the reason why you're doing stuff that you're doing. Do you like it? Are you doing it for your family? Are you doing it for the right reasons? Are you just doing it because you've seen someone else get rich off of it? Grant Cardone talking about making billions of dollars on real estate. So that's what you want to do just for the money.
Yes.
It's really not going to equate to anything. You got to dig deeper.
100%.
Yeah.
If you can tie it to your why,
Yeah.
it will, not that it makes it easier, but it will help anchor you when you get to those tough times, to be able to go back and remember why you're doing it, so that you keep going instead of giving up the first time you meet some resistance. It's so funny that you mentioned Grant Cardone. So I'll get a little bit vulnerable here for a minute. Last year, I had the opportunity to pitch a deal to Grant Cardone. I joined his real estate mastermind, and they have this event called Pitch Your Deal. And you go, and you get up on stage in a room full of, pretty knowledgeable investors. And Grant's there in the room. He's a very intimidating person. He's, big personality. Yeah. But I was really, really excited about this opportunity, but I was also terrified. I hate getting up on stage in front of people. It just is not comfortable for me. I've learned, the military forces us to learn things, right? As I went up through the ranks, I had to be able to get up and give briefs and do things. So I've learned to do it, but I don't enjoy it. But it was a great opportunity, and I had had a couple of successes with the first few deals that I had partnered on for capital raising. And so this opportunity came up, and I was like, I got to do it. I can't not take advantage of this. I'm paying a lot of money to be here. Like I should take advantage. So I did it. And from a personal perspective, it went really well. Like I used all the mindset techniques that I was working on beforehand to like calm my mind and get up there, and I did the pitch. And I will say, I knew going into it, I was pitching a value add type of deal, which Grant does not love. He loves newer, nicer, just sort of cash flow, hold and appreciate type deals. So I knew I was sort of going into the lion's den, right? I was pitching a deal that was not in like the box that he loves. But there were a lot of really hard questions from the audience, and I felt like I handled them well, but it definitely was like an eye-opening experience of like, if I want to pitch in a room like this, I need to level up my game. Like I felt really good talking to my friends and family about what I'm doing, sophisticated investors, but getting in a room full of like really intense, highly educated investors who like do this full time for their life, like that was a whole nother thing. And if I'm being completely honest, like initially coming back from that was one of those difficult lulls, right? Like it was one of those like, wow, like, should I be doing this? Am I actually good at this? I don't know. Like it didn't feel good. It was like, I need to figure out if this is really the thing. But ultimately, when I took some time to reflect, it pushed me. It made me realize that like if this is what I want to do and I feel like this is the right place for me, I'm not done learning. I need to keep growing. I need to keep challenging myself and putting myself around people who have more knowledge experience than I do so that I can keep growing. And so ultimately, I think it has helped catapult me forward. But in the moment, it was tough. Yeah.
So appreciate you sharing that first and foremost. And I wanted to ask a two-part question for that, what you just talked about. One, what was the feedback that you received, like from those seasoned investors or Grant himself or both? And then the second part is, it's funny that you said this too about putting yourself in rooms with people that are doing what you want to do. Make pretty much saying like the saying, you are who you're around, the five most people you're around. Like, how valuable has it been for you to level up and get yourself uncomfortable? Because we know comfort zone is a killer. How
Mm-hmm.
valuable has it been for you taking the initiative, paying that money? No one wants to pay $5,000, $10,000 initially for a coaching until you get that mindset of, okay, I'm putting that skin in the game, like you mentioned earlier, right? Like I'd go out and buy a car or a vacation, like those can come. But if you level up your income, you can go on all the vacations you want at some point in life. But like, how valuable has it been for you to get around people doing what you want to do? And what was the feedback that you received from that event?
Yeah. So I will say, generally speaking, the feedback was positive. Like, I think most of those people recognize that, like, especially at the time, I had only been doing this for like a year. I was pretty new at pitching and certainly at that level. So I think most of their feedback was really positive. They talked about how poised and comfortable I looked on the stage, even though I felt like I was dying on the inside, but like
Dripping
I've
sweat on that stage.
learned to
Yeah.
learn to mask it pretty well on the outside. So that was good, reinforcing that like even though I don't like being on stage, like I can do it and I can add value to people by doing it. But it's something that I am definitely still working on, like the mindset piece and like not feeling so stressed and anxious when I'm up there. But as far as the pitch, I think it really was more like knowing your audience. And so in the future, if I was going to go back to that event, I would want to pick a deal to pitch that I knew was more in line with what my investors that I was pitching to were looking for. If I know I'm going into a room where 90 something % of the investors are looking for cash flow deals, it's probably not a great, place to go pitch a development where you're not going to see any cash flow for 3 years or, whatever it is. And so I would say that's probably the greatest lesson that I took away is know your audience and, so you can really tailor the pitch and tailor, ideally the deal to that audience. Um, and then how valuable has it been to put myself in those rooms? I mean, it's hard to put a price tag on that right now, right? Like we'll see in a couple years what that ends up looking like in actual dollars. But in terms of where I've seen my personal growth over the last 2 years as I've continued to put myself in those places where I regularly feel like the dumbest person in the room. I mean, invaluable. That was just one example of like, being in that space and interacting with people like Grant Cardone and the folks that he pulls around him really pushed me forward to to get more education and to figure out like how can I better serve this level of investor. And then the other piece, which is how we have connected, it has been through the War Room. And so I joined the War Room Mastermind a little over a year ago. And very similarly, it has really broadened my perspective on just different opportunities that are out there. And it has also brought people into my life who I'm not sure I otherwise would have connected with that, we're all in the rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like we are all helping each other to level up in our business and real estate investing endeavors. So another member of the War Room and I are currently partnering together on a deal we just closed this week here in San Diego. It's a 10-unit apartment building, and we're going to be converting the garages into ADUs. And I never would have I'm not sure that I would have found him any other way other than being in the War Room. But we've been able to discover this incredible synergy between the two of us where he has the operator experience and a passion for affordable housing in San Diego. And I have the investor relations background and experience to be able and really just like the administrative business ops, like all the stuff that I bring from my healthcare background. The two of us together are like a dream team because we fill the gaps in each other's strengths. His strengths are my weaknesses and my weaknesses are his strengths. Yeah. So it's this really great symbiotic relationship where we complement each other really well and are able to work together to bring a really great product to our investors. And so, that's just one example of many where people who I have connected with through the War Room are really elevating my business and my own personal growth.
Yeah, most definitely. I know when I joined, I kind of almost went back on it. I was, oh wait, did I make a mistake? Because I've joined mentorship groups before, and like they haven't really amounted to what you pay. But you live and you learn, you try. And Dave reached out, and then the people I've met in the group, Steve, James. There's people in the area. I live in Florida. You're in California, but there's people all over the United States. There's people globally. There's people overseas that are in the group, and they're
Mm-hmm.
all related to the military, whether they're still active or they're veterans. But it is definitely a place that you can bring yourself to if you want to level up, if you want to ask questions and get an immediate answer from someone that's actually done it before. Anything that you could probably think of, someone's in the group probably doing it, whether they own a hotel, whether they have multifamily, whether someone's just starting off. It's definitely a great place to be. It's something that I used to like say when I first got. I was like, man, we should have been buying apartments like when we got back from Afghanistan instead of going to buy bottles or something like that in the club. We should have like leveled up. But
Yeah.
you're 21, 22, 18, 19 years old. You're not really I don't know. At least I wasn't thinking about that. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully
You just
other
don't know
people,
any different.
yeah, you don't know. You just like, I was
Yeah.
gone 15 months or a year, but yeah, definitely check out the War Room. They're on Facebook, Dave Pierre. And yeah, if you guys want to get around someone that's doing great things in real estate and willing to help you, they have coaching calls. They got people on every week. They have small groups that will hold you accountable. And like Tracy said, there's people in there partnering to do deals. I mean, it's not just a place that you just go
Yeah.
post memes and scroll endlessly and get no value out of it. There's plenty of value to be added to anyone that's interested. So appreciate you sharing that as well. What's next for you, and what would you like to see happen in your own endeavors in real estate?
Yeah. Great question. So I am really excited to see where things go with this new partnership with Adit. Um, we've got a couple more deals in the pipeline, and I I really want to be able to focus my energy and attention um, on doing deals here in San Diego. So that's the goal for the future, is to get to the point where we can do 100% here locally in our backyard, really building and affecting our community in a positive way. The first few deals that I was a partner on, were all out of state from where I was. So I was living in Texas, and these deals are in North Carolina and Oklahoma and Tennessee. And so there's great opportunities all around the country to find these properties, fix them up, provide safe, affordable housing for families, but it doesn't have the same connection when we can do it in our own backyard and actually impact the community that we live in. So I'm really excited about kind of doubling down on that and really building something special here. Um, Also, for my family, kind of more on a personal note, I did decide to go back to work so that we could afford to live in San Diego, because it's a little more expensive than
Yeah.
San Antonio, in case
Oh
you
yeah.
didn't know.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, right.
But totally worth it in the short term for me to go back. I'm working for the Navy again, and so to go back to work, but on my terms, has been really great and helpful to give us a little bit of that stability that I don't know if everybody else is like this, but coming from the military background, like, I'm just used to having that stability, and it's nice.
Yeah.
So at least for the short term, having that is kind of like a foundation while we're reestablishing ourselves here in San Diego, has been great. But I would love to be able to pour 100% of my time into continuing to build my real estate investing business, and carve out more time that gets dedicated for our family. So that's the goal, is that I will at some point in the hopefully near future transition back into full-time entrepreneurship, where I'm in control of my time. I love working, and I love building and creating and doing all the stuff that we're doing. To me, that doesn't feel like work. Um, so I don't intend to stop doing that anytime soon. I just would like to get back to the point where I'm in control of my time. So that's the short term goal.
Okay. What are some of the biggest things you've learned in the last 2 years by doing, your venture in real estate that stick out to you the most?
Great question. So I think first and foremost, how critical mindset is to my long-term success. I think when I was in the military, I dabbled a little bit in like leadership and personal development and that kind of stuff, but I'm not sure that I really understood how powerful mindset was until when I retired and I had a little more time and I was reading a lot of books and kind of really digging in on personal development. Um, I started to see how impactful it has been on my life over these last 2 years. And so I think I would encourage people to establish some kind of mindset practice, even if that's just like 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning, do the miracle morning. I like to listen to Growth Day by Brendan Burchard. He does a Daily Fire episode every morning, that really just kind of gets me in the right headspace, with that, positive forward outlook, and thinking about, approaching the day with like, how can I make somebody's day better today? How can I have a positive impact on the people that are around me? But those little things, when you do them every day, they really start to make a big difference. And so mindset has been a big piece. The other is taking action. I think it was very easy for me to fall into that trap of like, I don't know whether you want to call it overthinking, procrastination, analysis paralysis, whatever term you want to come up with for it. But like, just getting in my head and not actually, having all these ideas, but then like talking myself out of them. And so taking action for me was pivotal in really moving the needle forward. And so sometimes that can be as small as, making a phone call to an investor, sending an email, guesting on a podcast. I mean, whatever it is, but like actually taking action and doing steps that are going to move me closer towards my goal. And then building in that consistency, like we talked about. And then the last thing I would say is get some accountability. Having a community around me that I can pour into and that also wants to pour into me and see me succeed has been really, really critical to the success that I've had so far. I think those three things combined together, when you look at the mindset, taking action, and then having accountability, has been really, really, kind of like the three steps to success for me in these last 2 years.
Okay. So what were some of the books that stuck out to you the most?
Ooh, there's so many. I think The Gap and the Gain was really impactful for me. I have a tendency to always be looking forward. And so I'm looking at where I want to go and looking at that gap between where I am and where I want to be. And The Gap and the Gain, the book talks about, I mean, it's good, it's great to have goals, but like we also need to stop and take stock of like where we are and look back and look at all the gains that we've made to get to where we are so far. And I think a lot of us, particularly in the military community, the type of high performers that are drawn to the military in the first place, um, we have a tendency to forget about that. And we're always looking at what's the next thing instead of actually acknowledging all that we've accomplished so far. So that's a really good one. Trying to think for mindset if there's any others. I mean, Miracle Morning honestly was the first kind of like mindset book that I read. Somebody was doing a 30-day challenge for the Miracle Morning, and I was like, oh, this seems, I had just retired. I had no structure in my life. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this seems like it might be good for me. And it really helped me kind of build that foundation of consistency in the morning and getting up and making sure I did my exercise and spending some time thinking about my intentions for the day. And most importantly, I think for me was the act of writing. I've historically been terrible. I've never been good about keeping a journal or anything like that. But one of the 6 actions in the savers in that book is scribing or journaling. And that really, when I started putting words on paper, it it changed the game. There's something, that happens in our brains when we're able to put the words on paper, because then you can see it, you can touch it. It's not just an idea that's floating around, like it's a concrete thing and you can actually move forward with doing it.
No, it's true. You get your subconscious mind working at all hours of the day, even when you're sleeping, for those goals or those actions that you want to put on
Yeah.
paper and make happen. If you had everyone in the military sitting, in front of you, and you got to get back on stage, it's not with all these seasoned investors, but it's with people that served in the uniform, right? So maybe you'll be a little bit more comfortable, but definitely a lot more people. What they say, around 3 million people in the military. So, what would be your message to them, not only about what you could do in real estate, but leaving the military as a whole?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think it would be that you can create the life that you dream of. It is attainable, it is possible for all of us. But you have to have the dream first, right? You have to actually dream about what would an ideal day look like? What would your life look like if you didn't need a vacation from it? And then start putting the steps and the blocks in place to build to that. And that's something that I'm really passionate about too, is helping people kind of map out what does that future version of me look like? What does, my extraordinary life look like? And how can I start becoming the person that I need to be to have that life?
Okay, fair enough. All right, now I'm gonna get some rapid fire questions. Let's see what you got. Let's for
All right.
fun. Before, on a serious note, I appreciate you coming on and taking some time out of your day to share. I know it's early where you're at too, because you're all the way in California. So appreciate you getting on here and sharing your expertise, and look forward to hearing what you have come up the next 2025 and on. So thanks for connecting and sharing your expertise with us all.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you.
No problem. So, what was your favorite duty station?
Ooh, oh, this is so hard.
Uh,
I think I would say Italy.
Italy. Okay. Why? It was
Yeah,
Singapore
Naples,
up
Italy.
there. Was Singapore
Oh
close?
yeah, it's between Naples and Singapore, but
Okay.
I think Naples. I I was like a young JO with a lot of expendable income. And so I traveled extensively around Europe and just had so many, great adventures. And yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Nothing like those $30 Ryanair flights or the train,
You got it.
Yeah.
Cheap European flights, a lot of places you can get to in the weekend.
Yeah. Hey, if you're in Europe, don't stay in the barracks. Even if you're anywhere, get out
No.
and travel, explore. They used to line up at the DFAC all early in the morning. Like, guys, you're supposed to be on a 4-day weekend. You guys supposed to be gone somewhere, not drinking in the barracks. But anyways, that's a whole nother
Yeah, it was
subject.
our goal to do a trip every month somewhere.
Oh, there you go. You had the right idea. You had that officer money though too, so you guys had a little bit more to play with. But no, it's all good. What was your least favorite dude station?
Ooh, Great Lakes. Thankfully, I was only there for boot camp and A school, so it wasn't too long.
Did you go in the winter?
No, thank God. It was like summer and fall.
Okay. All right. What's one thing you miss most about the military?
Oof, camaraderie. That has been like the single, and I've fixed it. I've addressed it through some of these virtual groups that I'm in. But man, retiring, it was so hard to find people that I connected with outside of work. Um, that was probably my single biggest challenge in San Antonio. I was like, I couldn't find my people.
Yeah.
And I never had that issue in the military. It's like you have an instant family, right?
Yeah.
So that loss of that connection and camaraderie was really palpable.
Seriously, I feel like I've asked so many veterans that same question. We all say the same thing. No matter where you were stationed at, you had your best friends there, and then but then people with PCS or ETS or retire, and it's kind of weird, but that's just how the military rolls, I guess. The last
Yeah.
question I got for you was really a call to action. Who would you call out to come on this podcast and share their story from leaving the military and rising the ranks of real estate?
Oh, a deet. You gotta have a deet on here. He started out as like a bosun's mate, like a junior enlisted on the ship, and now he's freaking crushing it as a developer. Yeah, a deet.
All
He's
right.
a. I mean, I don't want to say rags to riches story, but he has a really great story.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you sharing everything and looking forward to connecting with you in the future. If you got anything else for anyone, now's your time. If not, we'll wrap it up for the day.
Awesome. Thanks again, Michael, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share with everyone today. I hope it was valuable. I would love to connect if anybody has questions, whether it's about the lifestyle design stuff, creating your vivid vision. If you want to know more about how to invest passively in deals, any of that, I'm an open book. I can share my Calendly link with you and my website afterwards, so you can put that in the show notes. But it's just TLC Ventures, my initials there, TLC Ventures .biz, B-I-Z. So you can find me there, and there's a way to connect with me on the website. But I would love to connect and continue sharing and helping folks grow.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for coming on, Tracy. And if you guys made it this far, appreciate you guys listening in. And just remember, you guys can do anything that you want to do in life, whether you're in the military or not. And looking forward to help change your guys' lives in a positive way. So thanks for joining us and have a great day. Talk to you guys later.